Happy 2017, Muskie fans. We are here in snowy Cincinnati, our first snowfall of the year, to do our Razorcast. That's Reaker and Zink on Muskies basketball. Jim, welcome back to the frozen tundra after a sunny sojourn in the sunny South.
Well, thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's a snowy morning. Of course, us being both former educators, brings back positive memories. Unexpected day off sometimes to get caught up on whatever, sleep, work, eating, and then you also get paid for it. So as an educator, of course, those snow days were always looked forward to. It was just going back. Although you get it at the end of your Christmas vacation. I'm not sure that's great, although I always remember, just give me one more day. Just give me one more day. I'll be fine.
It takes a little while to recharge the batteries. I didn't even look. Are there schools off today? It didn't seem like it was that much snow. But
almost all of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it kind of surprises me, too, because my dear wife still does do a little educating. She got a call about 6 o'clock this morning, and I said, it snowed. And she looked outside, and she goes, not really. But and then when I got up, I noticed it must have hit at a time when it made the roads very slick and treacherous as the buses were getting out. And then the forecast was it was going to continue for most of the day. So that must have been. But, yeah, most of them are closed. I think I saw 167 last time I looked when I was looking online. So,
hopefully some of those folks are listening.
Happy snow day to all those that are taking advantage of it today.
And again, hope you're taking the time to track us down and listen about Xavier Basketball. I don't think that's the school kids' first option, but maybe some of those parents who stayed home to watch them. Well, not much going on in basketball this week. We got a lot to talk about in the week and week plus to come, but let's go back. Only game we've really got to cover was the Georgetown game, which was probably a little closer than Coach Mack wanted it to be, but of course it was at home and still technically over the Christmas break. So break it down for us there. What exactly happened for the Muskies to be scared just a little bit by the Georgetown Hoyas?
Well, actually the game was played at Georgetown, and there were some things that could have led to a tough game, which it turned out to be, but also the Muskies might have not come through in the fact that it was an 11 a.m. start on New Year's Eve, so that's kind of strange. You never know how your team's going to react to an early start like that. In fact, I heard Chris Mack make the comment that it was the most intense game he's ever played at 11 a.m. in the morning. The other thing, if you looked at the box score and didn't know the score, that would really worry you is that Trayvon Blewett, their leading scorer, only scored 1 point and was 0 for 10 from the field. Now, if I told you that before the game started, that it was going to happen, you're going to tell me the Muskies don't win this game. So I'm going to turn that around and make it a positive. Even though Trayvon Blewett went 0 for 10 and only scored 1 point, they won. They found a way to win. The final score actually being 81-76. So that's the positive, that they figured out a way to win. And I think in the Big East, again, your formula for winning the Big East or finishing near the top, I believe, is hold serve at home, win all your home games, and find a way to win 4 or 5 of your games on the road. Because, and we're going to talk about here in a little bit, as you see, of the 10 teams on any given day, anybody can beat anybody. And we'll talk about some of those that have already happened. The other very positive that came out of it is Edmund Sumner stepped up. Edmund Sumner, actually it was his birthday, and he scored 28 points and was 14 for 17 in free throws. I think overall the Muskies shot 29 for 38, something in that category, which is pretty good. That's been one of the things that we've talked about all year long that's been kind of a weakness. That alone there was good. Now, Edmund, he did have 4 turnovers, and that's something that I think he's going to have to continue to improve on. One thing I think I heard on the broadcast, one of the announcers I thought was a very good commentary, that for Edmond, he's so talented and he can do so many things. It comes down to sometimes it's about decision making, trying to make the pass that he really shouldn't be trying to make. He thinks he can make it because he is so talented. So I think through maturity and more experience, got to remember, Edmond is really a sophomore because he redshirted his freshman year. So he's just a year and a half into his career. Of course, he's had all these accolades, that he's got it. He's got the height. He's got the speed. He's got the ball handling skills that everybody thinks he can go in the NBA. But I think Edmond still, has to improve in some areas, and that turnover, has to come down. He's averaging 3.1 a game, but that has come down. It was up around 5 at the beginning. Other thing positive about Edmond is he brought down 8 rebounds. And rebounding, I think, has been a key for the Musketeers all year long. They actually out-rebounded the Hoyas 42-36, and I think there's only been one game where they have been out-rebounded, and Rasheed Gaston led them with 9 rebounds. But again, the key for me was they found a way to win this game because it was back and forth, and you got into about the last 4 minutes, and I'm sitting there watching the game thinking, okay, here's where you got to make the plays, here's where you win the game, and they did it.
Yeah, and I'm with you on a lot of those points, Jim. A lot of the same things we've talked about. K through, the Muskies got outshot 50% to 39%. I think a lot of that was because of Blewett as you come through, but still they out-rebounded and, finding a way to win an off game. One of the keys for me, you mentioned on it just tangentially, was not just the free throws, but it was the free throws down the clutch. This time they were hitting the front ends of one-on-one. Sumner went down. I think he hit 8 out of 9 in the last 3 minutes as they kept sending him to the floor. And, of course, McCurl was 8 for 9 for the game. So maybe they turned around a little bit after those close situations. And they're going to need it, as we're going to talk about here in a little bit, heading into probably their toughest 10 days in the year. But before we do that, we've got to have what you now refer to as our Miles minute. Unless you've got more you want to add about the Georgetown game, and let us know what's going on with Miles Davis.
Well, just one more thing or actually 2 more points about the game I wanted to make is they made a decision at halftime based on the outside shooting wasn't there, playing, on the road sometimes in a unfriendly environment. You're just not hitting the shots. But at halftime, they made the decision that Chris Mack wanted Edmond Sumner to drive the ball to the basket. Number one, to pick up fouls and have free throws. And also he believes, I think, that Sumner, in that game anyway, against the defense, is going to have a better scoring opportunity by driving to the basket. So that's good that they realized that and executed it to a T to win the game. And the other point I just wanted to make is Malcolm Bernard, who just is kind of a quiet player, but what he does, he played defense. He plays defense very well. He's a 6'5", 6'6" guard that can play defense out on the perimeter. And he added 9 points. So he stepped it up, and that's probably where they win the game with his help, given Blewett's output. You put him and Blewett together, and they get 10 points. And if Trayvon Blewett would have scored 10 points, it wouldn't have been such a big deal. So I think you have to give accolades to Malcolm Bernard, who was a late pickup, a fifth-year student, who I think is going to be a key for this team.
Yeah, I hear it, and getting some support from those other starters and people off the bench is going to be very important as we go forward, as we've talked about before. So tell us what's going on here with Miles that you've heard.
I don't know what's going on with Miles. I don't know where Miles is. I don't think anybody knows where Miles is, but I did want to relay an interesting tidbit I picked up off one of the boards. They were discussing, there's the rumor out there that he has been in Philadelphia training with Allen Iverson. Now, if you remember anything about Allen Iverson, a great basketball player, of course, in his own right, went to Georgetown for a year or two and actually had a great NBA career for the 76ers. But the one other thing that I remember about Allen Iverson is that makes this kind of ironic. I don't know if he's there, been working out with him or not. It could be, who knows. But the fact that you remember that Allen Iverson, he was one who didn't like to practice. He always used to say, hey, I don't have to practice hard. I'll play hard when the game comes. So I thought that was kind of ironic that this story comes out that he's supposedly been training with Allen Iverson. As long as this keeps going on, that he does not, there is no sighting of Miles Davis in the Cincinnati area on the Xavier campus, I think the stories are going to get more and more creative and crazier, and I think that's basically where this one came from.
Well, they're all going to be crazy, and I have to defend AI just a little bit. And he gets that rep from that one little photo clip about we're talking about practice. Everybody jumps on it, but John Thompson called him the hardest working player that he ever had. But he does get that rep that he's lightened up a little bit. So we'll see if he's getting some help from him. But like I say, we've said before, we're going to know Miles is back when Chris Mack stands in front of a podium and says, Miles is back. Well, that'll lead us into what's coming up. It will be a very, very tough week, I think, for the Muskies, and will help them define their season. Just to let you know also, before we get to that, it will set it up with what has started in the Big East. And we talked about how tough this conference is, and it sort of came to fruition as they started battling each other. In the past week, we saw Villanova just squeaking by DePaul, a team that nobody thought they'd have much trouble with. St. John's beats Butler. Now, you had those two guys at the very bottom of the conference, and one almost beats the number one team in the country, and one does beat a top 25 team. And, of course, then St. John's went on to lose to Creighton last night. Nova, of course, in the match everybody thought beat Creighton, which was a really, really good game. I don't know how much of that you got to look at. And, of course, last night, the big game, Butler does defeat Nova to knock them off the unbeaten list. So just in that first week, and Xavier wasn't really involved in that because he didn't have any other games, you see how tough it's going to be as we work through the Big East.
Yeah, exactly. And the one thing I think you're going to say, and it's already proven true maybe quicker than people thought, is on any given night in this league of the 10 teams, anybody can beat anybody. I mean, that's just a fact there, and it's already been proven with Butler, of course, being upset by the Johnnies, and then them turning around and beating Villanova, the number one team in the country. DePaul, again, giving Villanova a scare on their home court. It just, if you don't come to play every night, there's a chance of losing. And I remember Chris Mack saying that at the beginning, or when we were starting to lead into the Big East season, that you got to come every night. And another big point he made, and I think it makes it clearer now, he said things are going to happen good and bad. That's just a given when you go through a league schedule. You're probably going to have a big win here and there, and you're going to have a big loss that maybe people are going to look at as an upset here and there. He said the key is putting each game away and moving on to the next one. Whatever happens, whether it's great or it's low, just make sure you focus on the next opponent, because that next opponent is going to be your next win or loss, and it's the only thing you have control over. So I think that the way we've seen the Big East start out just echoes it's going to be very, very true. But you got to say, as a Xavier fan, you wake up this morning and you see the Muskies at the top of the standings. Of course, part of it is because they didn't play, and so they weren't. A couple of the other teams lost last night that were undefeated. So because they didn't play, that's why they kind of are sitting up there. But that's okay. The standings I'm looking at shows them with a half-game lead over 4 other teams. So we can say right now we're on top at this point on January 5th, 2017.
You're on top of the mountain until somebody knocks you off. And I don't know how much you got to see that Butler-Nova game. Fantastic game to the end. And just to tell you how rough it was, I mean, Butler had to hit 100% of its free throws in order to squeak that one out. And that one could have gone either way, and I think that's what we're looking at. That leads us into what's coming up for the Muskies, this coming week. They host that St. John's team on Saturday in Samari Ponds, who we talked about on our Trogcast on Tuesday. And then they've got to travel to Philly to face Villanova on Tuesday. Then they've got to go to Indy and visit Butler next Saturday, and then come back for Creighton on Monday the 16th. So in your opinion, after this week, where between 4-0 and 0-4 is Xavier going to sort of land in this tough branch?
Well, what you bring up is a key point, because it's some of the discussion online that some of the boards I read that has been discussed is what do we need to do? And some people have said, if we come out of this 2-2, I'll feel good, as long as we don't come out of this 1-3, 0-4. But I don't even know. Again, back to just a previous discussion. We can look down the road. Hopefully, I don't think the team can look down the road, because I don't think they can look past Saturday. Again, the Johnnies. I did watch almost all that game last night with Creighton, because I had never watched a full game of both those teams play. I actually had not seen St. John's really play at all. I watched Creighton for about a half in one of their non-conference games that they had a blowout. I think it was Arizona State. So I wanted to watch that game to get a feel for both those teams. And I was impressed by Pons and Levette. Pons, after last night's averaging 17.6 points a game, and Levette is 17.1. Both freshmen, both great basketball players. Both can light it up from outside. Both can drive and score at the bucket. The thing that I did notice, I think, will be a key to the game on Saturday is Xavier needs to take advantage of their size and strength. Both Pons and Levette are not very physically, they're not big at all. I think they're both about 6 foot and only weigh maybe 170, 75 pounds. In fact, on the floor, they actually look small. And that's one of the keys I think that Xavier has is even their guards. They're averaging 6'5", 6'6", with Blewett, Sumner, Makura playing those positions. So I think that'll be the key. They're probably going to get their points, but what you got to do is try to keep them in check. And what I did notice about the Johnnies is it looks like they just love to run, almost play the chaos, what do I call it, playground game. Very talented players out there. So Xavier's going to have to, I think, control the pace. Where I think another place they'll have the advantage is rebounding, which has been a key advantage all year, where they get second shots and easy points underneath. I think they just got to play their game and try to limit the turnovers. Again, don't give, and that's my worry. But if they play the Johnny style, they might get into a game where they start turning the ball over a lot and giving the Johnnies some easy baskets. So that's kind of what I see as, and again, the other advantage, which is going to be the advantage of every team in the Big East this season, is it's going to be at home. And classes starting on Monday, I'm going to say that the student section is probably going to be full again and will be full for the rest of the season, which I think is a key advantage for the Muskies. We've talked about it before, that they're one of the top 5 in the country for having the home court advantage at the Cintas Center.
Well, it says something about the league that you were able to just spend 3 minutes talking about what you had already said was probably one of the lesser teams in the league. So that begs the question: is the same sort of formula what it's going to take to get through the Villanova, Butler, Creighton gauntlet that they have the week after that?
Well, the key, one of the keys there is the Villanova and Butler games are both on the road. And again, so you go back to what I had talked about before, that I think you try to steal 4 or 5 of those wins, if you want to compete for the championship. I think overall, I would say right now the champion of the Big East is going to have no less than 3 losses. Villanova, again, they showed you, and I've been to Hinkle Fieldhouse before. It's a great advantage for the Bulldogs there. It's an old venue. Of course, it's got a lot of history. Everybody knows it was where the game in the movie Hoosiers, the Indiana State Championship, was played. They just remodeled it, but still it has a different feel for it when you walk in. And also one of the problems, and I've been there before when this happened, I guess it happened last night. I actually wasn't watching the Butler-Villanova game live, but I guess they were having problems with the clock. And Xavier fans will remember a few years ago over there that the clock just stopped running near the end of the game, which basically allowed the Butler Bulldogs to get back in the game. Of course, they said it was a malfunction of the clock, but it's happened there many times where people almost feel like there's something going on there. In fact, I was reading a bulletin board where one Xavier fan was saying the NCAA needs to investigate what goes on with the clock at Hinkle Fieldhouse. So they're both going to be tough games. But again, I like the fact that I think this Xavier team competes, and they realize, that they do have some offensive firepower. But again, as I've talked about before, I think defense is what keeps them in games and is really important on the road. You got to limit teams from going on runs and getting the crowd behind them. And I think this team can do that.
Well, and I'll just add one thing to that, and it's something we've talked about before. We've got to figure out a bit of a stronger bench. I mean, against Georgetown, our starters played 80% of the minutes. Now, it may not sound like a lot, but, blowouts, against Providence was only 66%. The tougher teams awake at 79 now. It also comes out, Nova against Butler, their starters played 78, whereas Butler's starters only about 68%. And then against Creighton, Nova, their starters were only out there 76% of the time versus 78% for Creighton. And that may not seem like a lot, but when you've got somebody like Sumner on the floor for 38 minutes, and he really came through against Georgetown with those free throws down the end, I just think in this state, they only played the one game. Now in the next 10 days, they're going to play 4. That fatigue becomes more of a factor. So let's come out with it. Luckily we'll be on the air halfway through all this. But what do you think? Are you happy with 2-2 when we talk about this in 2 weeks?
Oh yeah, I think 2-2 will. Again, these are going to be 2 of your tougher road games. I look at Villanova, Butler, Creighton as 3 of the tougher road games you're going to have to play. So you're getting 2 of those 3 out of the way. Again, I think the key is just holding your home court advantage and winning those games. But I am looking at the minutes, and you're exactly right. Now, Sean O'Mara, he did contribute more and has kind of worked his way back into a few more minutes and has given Rashid Gaston some time on the bench to rest during the games. Kaiser Gates, of course, after coming back from his injury, he had 18 minutes against Georgetown, so he's helping out. But yeah, we got to get more minutes out of Tariq Jones and Quentin Gooden, and of course both of those are freshmen. And I think that's part of the problem is sometimes that Coach Mack can't leave them on the floor because they're just making too many mistakes defensively, turning the ball over, and he's just like, I can't have you out there at this point of the game. So they're going to have to step it up. So I think if those 2 need to give us some more quality minutes, and then again, whenever Miles Davis comes back, going forward, that I agree with you that they're getting by with it now, but when we get to February, if they're doing it twice a week, then it could weigh on the Musketeers and lead them into a point where they maybe lose a couple games because they are worn out.
Yeah, and that's it'd be interesting. Now, basically Butler and Nova only go about 7 deep. Creighton goes only 8 deep, so it's a point across most teams. Anything else you got for us there, Jim, before we go on to our closing and adding our trivia and tidbits?
Well, back to Villanova and Butler. One advantage for the Musketeers is they don't have to play Villanova after this loss. I don't want to be, and I'm not even sure, I could look real quick here who Villanova plays next, but I would not want to be that team because I'm sure they'll be very, very focused after their first loss in 20 games. Who do they have on their schedule? I'm not sure who the Wildcats play this weekend. Oh, here it is. They got Marquette at home. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to be the Golden Eagles going into Philadelphia because I think that's probably going to be a very, very tough environment. They're back home, wanting to get back on the winning track. So at least the Muskies have a game cushion there because they go into Philadelphia the next Tuesday night. So that's all I have. Again, it's I'm not sure Villanova's as good as they were last year just because of who they lost. And again, Arcidiacono, I just believe he was a winner, and Daniel Shefu gave them the rebounding and the defense at the basket, which I don't quite think they have this year.
Well, the one advantage we may have in that Butler game, and even the Creighton game, is Butler has to go to Creighton on the 11th, which is the game before they'll host the Muskies. So they're in a tough grouping as well. So lots of great basketball going on in the Big East, and for Xavier fans, that St. John's game is what time on Saturday, Jim?
That'll be at 2:30. So perfect in middle afternoon game. So you can go to your favorite pregame place for a little bit of lunch and get the game in and be home for whatever you want to do on Saturday night.
Okay, that's great. And then they'll be back the following Saturday with those trips to Philadelphia and Indianapolis. They'll be back the following Monday with trips to Philadelphia on Tuesday and Indianapolis on Saturday. And I'm hoping that a few Muskie fans will at least make the drive up to Indianapolis to see that game. Okay, a couple quick things to get here. Tell you, and it gets in this, you talked about some of the message boards and reading them and not reading them. If you only watch one video this year from last year, it's actually last April, but it was brought back up, watch on ESPN's Buzz W, which is their female channel, the women's sports channel. Fantastic video on the takeoff of Jimmy Fallon, in which female reporters Farrah Spain and Julie DeCaro have sports fans read them their mean tweets. And it's meant, the guys brought in thought that it would be like a Fallon thing that turns out to be a very poignant few minutes in watching how unbelievably and inappropriately far some sports fans go. We need to get a handle on that. So check that out at ESPN Buzz W. And the other thing I need to say, before we get into your bits, and I'm sure you've got a trivia for me, is Godspeed to Ashton Eaton, who retired from sport yesterday. And just to give it, not to put you too much on the spot there, Jim, but do you remember why we should remember Ashton Eaton?
No.
Yeah, and that's the sad part, because a lot of people won't. And it's a big shift from the way it used to be. Ashton Eaton is the back-to-back Olympic decathlon champion, one of only three that's done that, with our own Bob Mathias in 48 and 52 and Daley Thompson in those twice boycotted games in 80 and 84. The reason I bring it up, I mean, this is a position that we just used to put on a pedestal in sports. And the United States has won 14 of the last 23 decathlons, going back to Jim Thorpe in 1912. Of course, Mathias with those back-to-backs. People like Rayford Johnson, who lit the cauldron in L.A. Bill Toomey. Of course, most people unfortunately know Bruce Jenner more as Caitlyn Jenner in his reality show and his advocacy for transgender. These guys used to get Wheaties boxes, and probably a lot of people don't remember. They're too old, but I'm sure you remember the Dan versus Dave commercials, because Dan O'Brien was one of the ones that was actually pointed toward the Barcelona 92 Olympics, with Dan O'Brien won in 96. But the last three Olympics, Brian Clay in Beijing, Ashton Eaton, and sadly, Ashton Eaton is probably known more for the negative publicity he accrued by rooting for his wife in the Rio Olympics, and his wife was a Canadian pentathlete, and she's also decided to retire. But Godspeed to both Ashton and Brianne as they take their life. It's just he got sort of caught in a cycle in the Olympic year where you got stories surrounding Michael Phelps, Simone Biles, Usain Bolt, Katie Ledecky. But love to see people go back to reflecting on the decathlon, which for many years we decided was the best athlete in the world. So, Godspeed.
Yeah, I was just going to make that point that you did used to call that person the best athlete in the world, and of course now I have no problem, and you wouldn't either, believing that the average American knows who LeBron James and Tom Brady are, but wouldn't know some of the names you just mentioned as great decathletes. So I agree with you 100% on that one.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we'll turn it over to you, Stumpy. I'm sure you've got one.
Well, yeah, we're playing the St. John's Red Storm, or as I saw on one board, they were referring to them as the Crimson Drizzle. Of course, back in the day, they were, you probably know, this isn't your question, but their name used to be the St. John
Redmen.
of course, and because of political correctness and all that we've gone through in mascots and names, they were actually one of the very first to kind of change that, and kind of probably personally agree that one should have been changed. And it is kind of a unique one. A lot of the, those teams go to the Red Hawks. We've seen that with the Miami University in Ohio here, and I've seen that with some other teams naturally go to that name. But the Red Storms kind of
happened in the Big East with Marquette. It used to be the Warriors, now the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's the opponent of the Xavier Musketeers this Saturday. So my trivia will surround that, and actually wanted to surround the trivia around their head coach right now in his second year as a head coach, and actually his second year of coaching overall. And I kind of gave him a little bit of disparaging reviews when we started the season, because I put him at the bottom and I said, I'm not sure what's going on there. And then, of course, the next week they came out and blew Syracuse out by 30 points and then made the big win over Butler. So, okay, I'm backing off Chris Mullen. Maybe he can coach a little bit or knows what he's doing there.
Got to go back
to his playing career. Just amazing. He is, of course, the leading all-time scorer at St. John's University. Scored, and this is just amazing, 2,440 points in his 4-year career at St. John's. And he was the 3-time, his sophomore, junior, and senior year, 3-time Big East Player of the Year. And that was kind of the heyday of the Big East. In fact, that really shocked me, because I'm thinking that Patrick Ewing had to overlap some of those years anyway. That's when him and the Georgetown Hoyas were a major player in college basketball. So I thought, wow, that's amazing. I wouldn't have guessed that. So we're focusing on Chris Mullen. Here's your question, and because I'm going to give you a count of I'll give you a count of 5 slow that you need to give me this answer, because probably if I give you 20 seconds to think about it, you'll really figure it out. So I'm going to throw this one at you. What year did Chris Mullen take St. John's to the Final Four, their only appearance ever in the Final Four?
Well, it's got to be in
5,
that.
4.
I'm going to say 84.
2, 1. That is a great guess. You missed it by 1 year. 1985, he took them to the Final Four. And the thing about that Final Four, number 1, that year there were 3 teams from the Big East in the Final Four: Georgetown, Villanova, St. John's, and they were joined by Memphis. Actually, it was called Memphis State at the time. Mm-hmm. And I believe that's when Calipari was there, because as I was reading about this Final Four, Memphis had to vacate that Final Four banner because of some ineligible players that played during that time. And I believe that's connected to John Calipari when he was there. And again, then this will bring this back. I'm sure you remember this. I know you do, because you're talking about it a week or so ago, that was the Final Four where Villanova pulled maybe one of the biggest upsets in the national championship game, where they shot 80-90%, didn't miss hardly any shots. And I believe that, they beat Patrick Ewing in Georgetown in that final game.
They did.
Actually, Georgetown was the one that knocked the Johnnies out that year, and Chris Mullen in the semifinals, and Villanova had defeated Memphis State. So, good guess with a limited time. I'll give you a B on that one today. That's pretty good with the limited time.
Out of my hands. When are you going to put me into a safe and throw me in the river and ask me the question?
Well, you last couple you had gotten spot on right away, so I had to create a little more difficulty.
We'll just fact check you a little bit. That wasn't Calipari too young to be that part of that Memphis State team. That was Dana Kerr.
Okay.
And they that and Chris Mullen is a great story. Not only coming scrappy out of Power Memorial and Xaverian schools there in New York, but also a great career with the Golden State Warriors in the NBA, and has overcome substance abuse. Some great articles written about him and the way that he's overcome his alcoholism, which got started by being a star athlete and getting the benefits of that. Of course, he was an executive in the NBA before he moved over to St. John's to try to bring his alma mater back to business. And I'll tell you what, in a couple of years, watch out for the Red Storm, because I think they're going to be storming a little bit harder as he continues to get the type of players that played like him into St. John's.
Yeah, again, and we mentioned on one of our broadcasts just recently that I think the Big East would love to have St. John's to be a major player, and I do concur with the university's choice of him because he is an icon, of course, and actually grew up in that area, so he knows the culture of New York City, and actually that's probably why Shamori Pons is there, because he actually is from Queens also. So I believe it was a good choice, and I, along with the Big East, I think, if you got a New York City team doing well, that's going to bring the Big East even more attention, and will be great. And here's what you have to look at. Again, I was giving him a hard time, but, last year they only won one Big East game. They were 1-17 in the Big East. He's 2-1 right now, and I'm sure they're going to win a few more games this year. So we'll give him time. I think it's progressing positively for them. So, and he kind of came in there with a bare cupboard. I know last year we talked about he had all those foreign players he had to bring in just to be somewhat competitive, even though they weren't. They only won 8 games last year. But I think he maybe does know what he's doing. And, of course, being a head coach sometimes is just being a CEO and being in charge and choosing the right people, whether players and coaches, to get you to a successful point.
Well, that's it for this week's Razorcats. Hope you'll join us on our Trogcast on Tuesdays with all things about NCAA men's basketball. 2 really old guys talking about sports, and we'll be back next Thursday with an update on Xavier Basketball with a couple of key games under our belt. Looking forward to those next 2 as they go through a very tough stretch. So wishing happy 2017 to all our listeners, and hope that we have you listening again next week.
And with that, we'll say go Muskies.